Hello and welcome to Sunflower Philosophy Tarot. My name is Juliana, and today's Timeless Pick a Card reading is guidance for how you can reparent yourself. And when I talk about reparenting yourself, I'm basically talking about connecting with your inner child and being able to fulfill a need that your inner child has that could have gone unfulfilled when you were growing up. Whether you had a good relationship with your parents or not, there's just a lot of nuances that go into us as human beings, and sometimes those things that we really need aren't even always obvious to us, let alone the people around us, right? Emotionally and intellectually and in all different aspects, even physically. So we are digging into whatever's coming up for you right now that could be helpful in your process of reparenting yourself, whether or not this is something that you're actively doing and working on, or this is something that's a new idea to you, but intrigues you and perhaps has drawn you in, because there could be messages here for you regardless of whether that's a framework you use in your life or not. So that being said, before I get into the rest of the reading, the group selection and everything like that, I do want to just mention that if you are watching this in May 2026, then the personal readings that I offer on my website, personal tarot readings, are all 30% off for the remainder of the month of May. And you can just check out our website for the offerings and see what's available and snag your reading now if you'd like to. But that being said, I want to get into a brief centering exercise. So for those of you who want to stick around for a little meditation to get you into the mind space, to tap into your intuition and accept the messages that are meant for you, go for it. Stick around. If not, there are timestamps that can help you navigate to the group selection and to your reading. So do what you got to do. And for those of you sticking around, let's get into it. So first, I ask that you just get yourself comfortable. If you're driving or doing anything that requires your focus, you can skip the, maybe you want to skip the meditation for now so that you can pay attention to what you're doing. But if you can, just sit back and relax and get comfy. And if you feel called to, you may close your eyes and turn your attention to your breathing. And just imagine that as you inhale, you're inhaling some wonderful, beautiful, relaxing energy. If there's anything that you feel like you really need right now in particular, you can imagine you're inhaling that. So, for example, love or peace or gratitude, whatever it is, just imagine you're inhaling it. And then as you exhale, that you're exhaling anything it is that you need to release. And as you exhale that, you can imagine that it's transmuting into something beautiful to put back out into the universe. And even just doing that can really just help you feel centered and feel more in touch with yourself. So go ahead and continue to take those deep breaths. And you can simply listen as I talk a little bit more about today's topic and help you ground into the energy for today. So, as I mentioned, we're focusing on reparenting. And so in this meditation, you may set the intention to connect with your inner child, with the part of you that might have needs that had gone unmet in some area. And as you connect with that part of you, you can also connect with the part of you that is capable and ready to reparent that part of you, to offer the protection or guidance or anything that you needed, emotional support, whatever it was that you needed, that we'll dig more into in the reading, that you didn't receive, or maybe in a particular instance didn't receive, because that can happen to all of us, no matter the nature of how we grew up. It's just a part of life that, especially as children, when we don't know ourselves, even what we need sometimes, that our needs don't always get fully met. And so, as you connect with this part of yourself, if there's anything that comes to mind, even right off the bat, that you want your inner child to know, or that your inner child wants you to know, let that come up. Make note of it. It doesn't have to make sense to you immediately. You might even want to write it down, but you don't have to. You can let that just come to mind. And take a moment to imagine that you're just sitting with that part of you, with your inner child, that they're with you at whatever age needs to come through for you. Maybe you don't even know. Maybe the age that comes through is actually an adult. Whatever it is, let it be, and be with it. And trust that you will connect with the group that has the messages that are most important for you right here and right now, and that you will connect with the messages that are truly intended for your highest good, that are truly meant for you and your inner child, and allow anything that does not resonate to simply pass you by. Know that when you get quiet and take this time to yourself, that in and of itself is an act of healing, especially when done intentionally and with the purpose in mind of being with yourself exactly as you are right now. Acknowledging that you have a right to just be. So, you may decide that you would like to continue in meditation for a bit longer until you're ready to move on to the rest of the reading. So if you would like to do that, you may want to pause the reading now. And for those of you who are ready to continue into the group selection, I want to thank you for taking this time to sit with yourself. And I want you to know that you are loved and worthy just as you are, just exactly as you are right now. And with that being said, in a moment, I will take us over to the group selection and you can get into the rest of your reading. Okay, hello and welcome to the group selection for today's reading. Whether you join me for the brief centering or exercise or not, I'm so happy to have you here. So thank you either way for coming here. And as I mentioned in the intro, we are focusing on reparenting yourself. So we're getting guidance for what your inner child might need at this time, might be asking for whatever's coming up for you right now that's related to this idea of being the parent that we might not have had in a certain moment or at a certain time in our life. Again, even if you had a wonderful relationship with your parents. We're focusing much more on what it is that you need and a lot less on whatever it is that went unmet and why, because we really want to put the focus on you right now. And just tap in as neutral a way, at least from my perspective, as neutral a way as I can, so I can bring through the messages that are the most helpful for you to move forward and to help that part of yourself that may have gotten stuck at a certain point grow. So with that being said, obviously there are 3 groups here. So let me just go through each of them. We have a card and a butterfly to choose from. Now, the butterflies probably look like they're all the same color to you, so I'll hold them up so you can see like that they're each slightly different colors, so you can get a better look. And also I'll hold up the card that is associated with each group. And because we are talking about reparenting and because May, when I'm recording this, is the month that has Mother's Day, and a friend had suggested this reading actually in honor of Mother's Day, I did pick from the Feminine Archetypes deck. So while this isn't specifically about Mother's Day or your mother or anything like that, I just thought we'd stick with that theme of the feminine archetype for the card selection. So the card that you select will contribute to your message, but also you can select it just based on what you're intuitively drawn towards. So without further ado, let me go through the groups. So we have group 1 with this white butterfly and the tricksteress card. So it's the white butterfly, if you can see it, it's kind of like sparkly. And then we have the tricksteress, which is, you can also just call it the trickster, with this little fox on it. And that's group 1. For group 2, we have this butterfly. I don't know if you can tell, but it's kind of like blue and pink and maybe a little purple in there. And we have the ancestress. So this butterfly and the ancestress for group 2. And for group 3, we have this pink butterfly. Again, this one might just look the same as the white one, but it is pink. It's a pink butterfly. And we have the rebeless, or the rebel. So those are our 3 groups. You can take all the time you need to select the group timestamps. I don't know why, I was just blanking. The group timestamps are in the description below, so you can navigate to whichever group you want. You can always pick more than one group. You can pick one, decide it's not for you, and pick a different one. You can listen to them all. Whatever you want to do, however you pick, however your intuition leads you through this reading, go with that, and I will see you over in your reading. Hi, Group 1. If you selected the white butterfly and the tricksteress card, then you are in the right place, and this is your reading all about how you can reparent yourself, what it is that your inner child is asking for right now that can help you meet some need that was perhaps unmet in childhood. And in this case, before I get into actually pulling the cards, I have the Mary L. Tarot deck here with me today. It's been a while since I've used her, so I'm very excited about it. Before I get into that and getting more of your message, I do already have some messages coming through just with the Tricksteress card, so I'm going to talk about that first. And actually, in tandem with the white butterfly, I'm kind of getting messages. So something that came to me when I was looking at that white butterfly was this concept of purity, right? Because white can be associated with purity, with innocence, with just perfection even. Some words that are coming through are like untainted, clean, all of that. And then we have the Tricksteress card here, which is someone who has a little bit more of an edge to them, right? Like the Tricksteress. Now, this is actually a light attributes card from the feminine archetypes deck. So it's like I don't know, for lack of a better term, exalted form of like trickster energy, right? This idea of like the light side of trickster energy and how that can actually be fun and playful and help you take things less seriously. So what it feels like is that for some of you, some of you might resonate, maybe some of you had a very traditional or religious upbringing, depending on your background and what was traditional and what was the dominant religion in wherever you grew up. Some of you may have had an upbringing where that was a big part of it. Or if that was not the case, there was just a strong emphasis on perfection or on living up to certain standards of living that might have centered on certain values, right? You're an okay person if you do this, but you're not an okay person if you do that, right? Like very much striving for perfection, to be the most moral and objectively clean, or it could even have something to do with like being a straight A student, right? Wanting to keep your grades like perfect. It could have something to do with that energy as well. But it also can just be in terms of behavior, right? How you behaved. And so the Tricksteress coming through is telling me that in reparenting yourself and reparenting your inner child, what's important for you right now is allowing more levity and playfulness and mischief into your energy, into your life, and accepting the parts of you that don't meet those expectations of like perfection or even morality that you might have been raised with. Because it feels like there could be a tendency to be very hard on yourself when you perceive that you've made a mistake or made a faux pas. And whether or not other people see it that way, right? Even if someone else is not offended by you, say, making like a joke at their expense, right? Like maybe you made a little joke and then they're like, and then you're like, oh, wait, was that too far? Like, do I know them like that or whatever? Even if someone else is like, oh no, that was funny. Like, haha, like, yeah, no, totally. You might still like second guess yourself or be hard on yourself. Or even if there is an instance where maybe you overstep or maybe someone else is offended by your behavior, there could be a tendency to be way extra hard on yourself when there might be more of a gray area. Maybe there is a case where it would be good to apologize or have a conversation about it. Maybe there's also cases where it's okay if someone misunderstood your intentions, but that doesn't mean that you're a bad person, even either case. even if you decide that you want to apologize, right? It doesn't have to be from this place of feeling like a bad person, right? There's the difference between like feeling guilt and then addressing it, and having shame and holding on to this idea that you're a bad person and that you did something wrong and therefore there's part of you that's bad, right? And then for some of you, there could be some specific behavior that you exhibited as a child where maybe you actually were a bit of a mischief maker, and there could be a part of you that could be ashamed of that, or maybe there's something specific you did in your childhood that you really got in trouble for and you've held on to some shame around that, right? That is needing to be understood in a new way from your adult perspective, to kind of look at yourself at that age that you were at, and maybe even observing like other like children who were at the age that you were at that time, and looking at them from the outside as an adult, seeing how different their worldview is, their perspective is, how they understand things, and then seeing how you were once that person and how you can understand where you were coming from at that age in a new way, in a way that is more forgiving and understanding of the behaviors that you exhibited, because you can see other children and other beings being the same way, or just being an age where of course they wouldn't have the context that you have now to understand how you might behave differently in a certain situation. You know what I mean? So yes, that's what we're dealing with now. This kind of almost dichotomy between like being perfect or like leaning into your mischief making side, your let's like joke around and have fun side, your maybe wanting to pull some pranks or have a like just take things less seriously. And that's what we're really leaning into right now with this energy. So I feel like that's a big part of your message already. But let's get into a bit more detail with the tarot cards. And then we'll close out with, I haven't decided if we're closing out with a moonology or a quote card, but we'll see what it calls for. So that being said, what guidance or advice, actually, yeah, let's phrase it this way. What guidance or advice do you have for group 1 when it comes to embracing more of this trickster energy, this mischief energy, this accepting, their playful side? We have the Queen of Swords. That's too many cards. What guidance or advice do you have? Okay. Actually, we'll take these 2 more cards. We have the 7 of Swords. And we have the 5 of Swords. So we have a lot of swords here. So that tells me this is very much about where your mentality is at. You're unlearning or relearning certain beliefs and perspectives that you might have been raised with. Again, there's like this idea that you were either raised to feel this certain shame about certain behaviors that may have led to you feeling like extra ashamed and cautious as an adult, or like a specific event or situation where maybe you were having fun and you didn't intend for something to go wrong, but something did, and then you kind of associated like just having fun and having a carefree time with this event, and you kind of blamed that. There's this feeling of like maybe blaming that aspect of your personality for causing trouble when that could not be actually the whole picture. Like in some cases, yeah, maybe you were irresponsible, you did something wrong, or there was a situation where it was called for your behavior to change. But that doesn't mean you have to shut down the part of you that is carefree and has fun, or that part of you is dangerous, or that it was necessarily all your fault to begin with. It really depends on the situation, of course, but like it feels like there's this part of you that shut down altogether because it was associated with being dangerous or just being unacceptable, that is now looking to come out and reemerge and have some fun again, right? Have some fun again. So with the Queen of Swords, 5 of Swords, and 7 of Swords being here, well, I know what the traditional meanings are for at least the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but these cards give me a little bit of different energy. So the first thing that actually came through with the 7 of Swords, because I actually do know there's some like Norse mythology woven into these cards. The Seven of Swords, seeing the raven and the snake, I don't actually remember if this card is particularly associated with Loki. Forgive me for not having that like symbology maybe memorized, but I did get a very like low-key, like not low-key, Loki, a very Loki vibe, like Loki from Norse mythology vibe. And Loki is very much a mischief maker. He's sort of a chaos entity, right? And so I was immediately getting that mischievous energy from the Seven of Swords. And that might not even be the proper interpretation, but it was the message that came through. Almost like I was looking at this raven and seeing like something mischievous in its eye, like the way that it has the jewel in its mouth, almost like it's like kind of running away with it, stealing it, but like there's something in it that feels lighthearted. It feels like this raven, like Loki, even if I'm not sure if like Loki is actually like this in mythology, but is unashamed and unabashedly himself, right? This idea of not being perfect, but not needing to be, and being able to accept that maybe sometimes you are quote unquote a bad person. Maybe that's what makes you a person. Maybe that's just okay. Maybe there's always more than one way to look at something. There's definitely this idea of releasing the attachment to being a good person, right? And that doesn't mean you can't value kindness or doing what you consider the right thing, right? But it can mean reevaluating where your values came from in the first place and reevaluating what your values mean about how you treat yourself and how you look at yourself, right? Because there are ways to be a kind and generous person without shaming yourself, without telling yourself that you'll be punished otherwise, right? And there's also allowances for the nuances of being who you are, where sometimes you might have the best of intentions and someone else is not going to necessarily see that. And they might have their perspective and you might have your perspective, and you both might be right. And from the other person's perspective, you both might be wrong. You know what I mean? So there's that allowing in of nuance in how you experience yourself and your life. And this allowing for taking things less seriously, and therefore when maybe something is misunderstood in your actions, or maybe you are a little selfish, or maybe you're not as nice as you could have been, or you realize maybe I could have behaved in a different way, you also just like let yourself be. Like maybe it's not that serious, right? Sometimes maybe it's actually not a big deal and you can let it go. I'm also seeing with the Five of Swords here, which that can speak to like competition and things like that. I'm actually feeling like with this woman and all of the owls around her and then this baby that she's holding, almost like as if I'm looking at the owls as siblings of this baby, right? This idea of like, maybe for some of you, you grew up in a big family and there was this like, even if it was unspoken or subconscious, competition for attention and for validation, right? There could have been some feelings of neglect that just came from you having a lot of siblings who also needed attention, and therefore there never being quite enough for each one of you, right? So there could be something to do with reparenting yourself that involves neglect or involves siblings, and perhaps a perception that maybe also in some cases, maybe like you feel like certain siblings got away with things that you couldn't. And like in some cases, maybe you're the eldest child and you're meant to be the model child, but then the youngest child is just like wild and carefree, and by then your parents didn't care, so they just let them do whatever they want, you know, that kind of thing. So that could totally be part of your situation. Or it doesn't have to be that exactly that dynamic, but in anything that could have had to do with siblings or even lack thereof, where there is this feeling of like not measuring up, or like if you're an only child, maybe like feeling like you have to be the perfect child because your parents don't have another child who can, I don't know, like become a doctor, take care of them, give them grandchildren, right? All the, you know, potential expectations that a parent could put on a child, right? It's like you have to bear all of that if you're the only child. So whatever your sibling dynamic is, I feel like there is relevance in that to your reparenting yourself right now, where it ties into allowing yourself to, if you're the eldest child and you kind of envied like the younger children for being more free, letting yourself run free in ways that you felt like you couldn't as a child, right? And it doesn't have to look exactly how it would have looked when you were a kid, but like, what's the equivalent of you doing that now, right? Notice where you might have an invisible leash on yourself that your parents might have had that you don't need to have anymore because you're an adult and you're taking care of yourself, you know? And none of this is to necessarily say that if you were in the situation, again, that you had a bad relationship with your parents or anything, because maybe in some cases you did. But for some of you, it may have just been the nature of the situation, you know, and the nuances of life and of your personality, of your siblings' personalities or lack thereof, that just got in the way of certain things being met for you. But it's like, you're an adult now. It's like, you know, when you're an adult and you realize, oh, like you're living on your own, you're away from home, you're like, man, like I wish I could have like some cake right now. And it's like the middle of the day. And you're like, well, technically, if you're an adult and you have like the means, you can just like go buy a cake and just eat it in the middle of the day. And like, you can eat the whole thing. You can eat as much as you want. And like, no one's going to stop you. And it's like, yeah, eventually you might be like, I don't really want to do that because I have other things to spend my money on. And also it might make me feel sick and I have other priorities. But like, the part of you that never got to indulge needs a little time to indulge, right? And so there's a part of your inner child that never got to indulge because you in certain behavior or certain ways of thinking or certain ways of acting, because you were told it was bad. And that part of you kind of wants to live it up a little bit, right? And you don't have to do anything extreme in order to indulge that, but just let it enjoy for a little bit. And it doesn't have to mean that it's going to become your new way of life. Now, of course, do continue to do that responsibly, as, you know, if indulging involves doing like something dangerous or something that like could be really negatively impactful to your health, do take that into consideration. But, you know, I feel like in a lot of cases, ways that you want to indulge or just let yourself be human and let your behavior go, I feel like there's a lot of ways in which just doing that is just going to take a weight off your shoulders that wasn't necessary in the first place, right? Like, I don't think a lot of you are like going too far off the rails. Like, I think it's like the opposite. Like, you've been too steady on the rails for too long in certain ways that like veering off a little bit is like, or I guess veering off the path. I don't mean, because like you don't, if you're on a train, you don't want the train to go off the rails at all. So like that's a bad metaphor. But I think you know what I mean. Like, you've been too like straight-laced or too uptight about certain things, even if it's just within yourself and not like when it comes to like expressing that to other people, that you can now like just let little things go, let little things slide, and trust yourself to get back on the wagon if you need to, or to embrace, you know, that life can be a little messy and a little fun, and you don't have to hem your life in with shame and with finger wagging and things like that. And with the Queen of Swords being here, I did mention mother energy. So for a lot of you, this could be really specifically tied to your mother. Does not have to be. But I'm getting with the Queen of Swords here, like, I kind of went backwards with these cards, but referring back to the Queen of Swords, this feeling of a watchful eye, a stern parent, right? But it can also mean detachment as well. So I feel like there is a message here that for some of you, perhaps this has to do with a Queen of Swords figure in your life, whether a woman or not, and your mother or not. That could be a sort of figurehead in your mind for this sort of policing. And like that watchful eye over your shoulder, right? This feeling of someone like watching you over your shoulder is like, that person might not be there anymore, or like might not be there every day, or at least not like constantly, but it's almost like in your mind's eye, this person's always watching over your shoulder. It's like that kind of feeling. Even if it's like not a conscious thing that you're thinking of them, it's like you're almost acting as if they are watching over your shoulder. And again, like there's for a lot of you, it feels like in this case, you're learning to let that go, and you're learning to take more ownership of your life and your behavior and let yourself off the hook for a lot of things that you might have been on the hook for in the past. But also with the Queen of Swords, there's a message here of detachment as well, from the perspective of not assigning so much moral weight to your thoughts and actions in a way that you might have been taught to. So detaching your emotional well-being from how the idea of am I a good person? Am I being a good person? Am I doing good? Am I this? Am I that? Detaching your emotional, your emotions, removing emotions from the situation, from when you're judging yourself and your actions, right? So if you are concerned about, if I don't shame myself and judge myself for doing this or that, then my life will go completely off the rails. There's this practice where you can observe from a more objective and detached perspective, where you don't have a lot of emotional baggage tied up in your assessment. So, the Queen of Swords, switching sort of from the stern parent interpretation to more of the sort of side that you would want to bring in more is this ability to look at yourself and your actions more objectively and without that emotional weight, where you're not looking at yourself am I being a good person? Am I not? You're not attached to the outcome, but you're more okay, let me think about this. Well, okay, was staying up until, 2 a.m. on a work night when I had to get up, in 4 hours and maybe going out and drinking with some friends, was that the healthiest decision? Did I have fun? Yes. Did I also feel sick the next day? Yes. Is it something I want to do every day? No. Is it something that it's okay that I did once? Yes. Is it something that maybe I want to do again sometime and I'll probably be okay as long as I, don't do it constantly? Yes. To be instead of being oh God, I feel awful today and I shouldn't have done that, and I'm going crazy or whatever. You're more objective about yourself. You're more detached and above, a bit more above it all, in the sense where you can sit back and be you know what? It's okay for me to let loose sometimes. You know what? Yeah, I feel kind of shitty. I don't want to do this all the time, but it's okay that I did once. You know what I mean? Or, you know what, I feel kind of bad, but I had a good time, and I'm not going to do this every single night, but if I can, it's okay to let loose and have fun, just live my life. You know what I mean? Or even to be you know what, I don't think I'm going to do that again, but it's okay that I did. It's okay that I found that out. It's okay that I learned that that's not something that I necessarily want to do. You don't have to go on this whole, tirade about yourself and shame yourself for a decision that you decided after the fact maybe you wouldn't do again or you would make differently. And that's the most important message here and takeaway from this group, I feel, is to be less judgmental with yourself and your actions, and to allow yourself to take yourself and to take life a little less seriously. So with that all being said, I'm going to close this off with, let's go with a Moonology card. Let's do a little Moonology card. And this will just be a closing message. Ooh. I have to take it out of the box, and I'm dropping the box everywhere. Okay. So what is our closing message? What does group 1 need to know from these Moonology cards? Choosing the moon, because, the moon, mother, Cancer energy, it just works and fits for May. I'm feeling called to say, if you want to ask a specific question that you would like the moon cards to potentially answer, just hold a question in your mind. Focus on that question. You could pause if you need a moment to think of it. You don't have to, though. I'll still also give an interpretation for the rest of the message. But yeah, if you have a question that you want the Moonology cards to answer, also think of that. All right, so. Okay, we got your commitment is being tested. First quarter moon. So to me, that speaks to you being sort of at the beginning of a cycle and being at the stage in a process where things might feel a little messy and uncertain, and it's the part where you're like tempted to give up, but you're being encouraged to commit and to make it through that messy stage. And I actually was talking about this with some friends earlier today, but like when you're a painter and you start, or drawer, or artist of any kind, and you start a project, sometimes you get to a place where it looks really ugly and you're tempted to give up. And if you do this a lot, you might end up like never finishing anything because you get to that ugly stage and then you're like, oh, let me just go do this other new idea instead, because like that just feels more fun because it's a new idea and I haven't started it yet. So it's like there's no judgment on what I've done so far, right? But in this case, in order to finish the project, you have to make it through the discomfort of that messy phase. And so it feels like that is a relevant message for a lot of you here, is like this idea of working on commitment. And it could be in a general sense, like maybe you're someone who feels like you struggle with commitment issues, could be related to your childhood experience. But for some of you, it could also be about a specific situation. It could be about this process of reparenting yourself, working with yourself in a new way. It could be about the process of if you've started a healing journey where you're like going to therapy about something or whatever. It could be in that case, it could be about just it could be about relationship commitments. It could be things like that where you have a tendency, or a specific situation where you have a tendency to get discouraged early on in the process and not always see it through. There's something where you are definitely being encouraged to see something through, unless you feel very deeply intuitively that like a certain thing is not for you, a certain path is not for you, right? But to not be fooled by your ego just telling you, oh, you can't do it. Oh, this sucks. Oh, whatever. And again, that can come back to this tendency to judge yourself. And for some of you, this ties into the message of having learned to judge your behavior very harshly in early life, because you might have this idea of yourself as someone who, even if you're still quite young, but even if you're older as well, who was kind of a hot mess. And maybe you feel like you don't have your life together, even if on paper you kind of do. Like there's this sense that you are a mess. It might be because you kind of have this habit of thinking of yourself in this lens that that you're never good enough, that nothing's ever good enough. And that's leading you to feel like, oh, well, you know, I might as well, I can't seem to do any right. I can't seem to make this work. You know, I can't reach this perfection, right? You feel like you're like constantly in this first quarter moon phase. But it's not because you actually are, it's just because that's how you see yourself, right? You still see yourself through this lens of being kind of a mess, or just not being quite what you are meant to be. And so, you know, obviously the message here is to commit to yourself, to realize that thus far in your life, you have committed to yourself because you're still here. Thank God. Amen. Stick around. And that you are still, even if you're older in years, you're still early on in your process because you're never done growing in this life. And especially if you're older, you may have restarted many phases in your life. And so you might just be at the beginning of a new phase, even if you've had many before. And so, yeah, it's never, if something's not easy or perfect right off the bat, or you're struggling with something for a long time, or just you're struggling to get started with something, it doesn't mean that you're failing, right? But it's an opportunity to test your commitment and to show yourself that you're committed to you or to whatever it is that's important to you. Yeah. Okay. So that's all I have for you, Group 1. So I hope that resonated. I hope you enjoyed this message. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, now through the end of May 2026, if you would like a personal tarot reading, they are 30% off. So go visit sunflowerphilosophy.com, and you can see the links to my other stuff in the description box. My mom and I are hypnotists, then we have a podcast where we talk more about that, so you can check that out. You can check out our hypnosis services on our website. Anything that you want to check out, just do that. Yeah, thanks again for being here. Have a wonderful life, and I will see you in another reading again sometime very soon. Bye! Hi, Group 1. If you selected this multicolored pink and blue purpley butterfly and the Ancestress card, then you are in the right place. And this is your reading about how you can reparent yourself right now. So, whatever it is that your inner child needs that maybe you didn't receive growing up in the way that you needed, or whatever's showing up right now for you that feels like it's coming from some kind of deeper insecurity from when you were younger. How can we address that? How can we work with that? How can we help heal that? So that's what we're looking at. And I am going to get into more details with the Mary L. Tarot in a moment, but first we're going to begin with talking about this card here, the Ancestress, which you chose. So right off the bat, the first message I got when this card came out for your group was this feeling of connecting with your ancestry, whatever that is. So for some of you, it might be connecting with your cultural roots, but for some of you, it might mean actually like very literally connecting with specific ancestors in your lineage, maybe both, and whatever resonates for you. And then there's also this feeling of perhaps a grandmother or some kind of a particular ancestor who may or may not be even still in this realm, being present for this reading and or coming through with messages in this reading, or just being significant, being a significant figure in your life, someone who's important to you, or especially if there's any kind of rockiness in that relationship, or there was a difficult relationship with an ancestor, there's a message to sort of begin to dig into that a little bit more, to heal aspects of that, to focus on bringing new healing and new perspective to that relationship or situation, even if the person has passed on. But there's definitely something important, of course, about ancestry, cultural background, that could have significance for you in terms of reparenting your inner child at this time. Now, in group 1, I actually got a lot more messages based on their card, but for you guys, I'm feeling called to really just jump right into the tarot cards and get more from that. And that's what I am going to do. Oh, actually, I did just get one more message that came through. Just looking at the butterfly and the pink and blue colors, the sort of purpley hues. There's for some of you, this is very specific, but for some of you, perhaps there's a mixed heritage background that could be significant, and maybe there's something to do with feeling, part of one world and not another, or being not being accepted in either world, that kind of thing. There's like a two-sidedness potentially to your ancestry or to some aspect of your family. Like maybe there's family drama between two sides of the family. Maybe there's something in your own nature that is dualistic, that feels like it's at odds with each other, that ties back into your childhood or to the family that you were raised in. So that's a message that's coming through as well that could be significant. Now, that being said, let's get into the tarot. So for group 2, how are they being called to reparent their inner child right now? Whoa. Okay, that's a lot of cards. We're going to take 3 of them. So we have the 6 of Wands. We have the 5 of Cups. And let's see, can you see that? Yeah. And we have the Page of Cups. Ooh, okay, yeah. 6 of Wands, Page of Cups, 5 of Cups. Okay, so there's something, and then 4 of Wands on the bottom of the deck, I just feel called to mention because in this case, I'm seeing it as almost like your foundations, your family, where you came from. Again, speaking to like, there's a tree on the, and roots on the Ancestress card, and then there's a tree on this 4 of Wands card, right? So this idea of your roots, your cultural background, your ancestors, all of that being very significant, very strongly. But there's some aspect where, okay, I'm getting more of that message of almost like one part of you being more recognized than the other, or recognizable than the other, or acceptable than the other. Like there's a part of it could be a part of your heritage and ancestry that you feel is more accepted by your family, by the world at large, by your community, by friends, whatever it is, than another, or just more recognized and more validated than another. But it does feel like there's some aspects where like there's parts of you or aspects of you that have been accepted and recognized, and then parts and aspects of you that have not been accepted or recognized, particularly by family and maybe by your ancestors, your ancestry. Maybe there is something for some of you that also comes from past lives, or is sort of like some kind of ancestral wound or ancestral line thing that you're working on healing, that maybe you feel like it all falls on you to do in some way. But there's also, again, just like this message of like, there's something about you like that's celebrated and recognized. And we have the Five of Cups here with this unicorn looking towards and I guess it would be your left as well, looking towards in the direction of the Six of Wands, and then not looking towards the Page of Cups, and almost like I feel like yeah, there's this message of like one side being recognized and the other not. And the Page of Cups is not even facing us, right? So it's, to me, it's feeling like an unseen, unrecognized part of you, almost like. And also the Six of Wands is facing forward. The Page of Cups is facing with their back to us. So it's almost like I'm seeing like the Five of Cups looking at the Six of Wands. So that's like people seeing one side of you, but then on the back side of you, there's another part of you that people didn't see. So it's like, and the Six of Wands, right, has this sort of like, they've got like this, I'm not sure what kind of rune it is. I think it actually is associated with one of the archangels. So this might be an archangel actually on this card. I wish off the top of my head I knew which one it was, but I actually do have these little angel runes here. Oh, so it might be Archangel Michael actually. So if I'm wrong, forgive me, but it might be Archangel Michael that's on the card. So Archangel Michael could be significant. The name Michael could be significant. That being said, like, yeah, there's this like, okay, that's accepted, but then like, and like, you know, aside from the rune on this angel or this person's forehead, they're not otherwise super adorned. They're kind of, you know, their skin is plain. Whereas on this Page of Cups, there's like all these tattoos, this color and stuff like that. So it's almost like I'm getting like, as for example, like in the Six of Wands, right? This like sort of plain-faced, protective, strong energy is accepted, but this more soft, emotional, creative energy is not as accepted. So for some of you, this could be a gender thing, right? The butterfly is pink and blue. So there could be aspects of your gender identity and expression that led people to accept certain parts of your personality more and accept other parts less. To recognize, you know, if say you're a masculine person or someone who grew up in a family that really valued masculine attributes, you know, valuing physical strength, valuing physical ability, valuing go-getter attitudes, stoicness, right? And then not valuing, and maybe even valuing certain career paths, but then maybe not valuing like softer, more emotional, more sensitive energies, not valuing more creative pursuits, not valuing, you know, that's one example of how that could play out. And so again, it's just this feeling of like, both of these are actually aspects of you. You're not one or the other, but only one half was recognized. And this could also, of course, have something to do with certain ancestral roots. If you have one parent from one background and one parent from another as well, there could be an element of that that comes into this. It really just depends on your specific situation. There also could be certain like LGBT identities that you could hold, an identity that you could hold that, you know, is not fully recognized, whereas like other parts of you are accepted. Maybe your family doesn't understand a certain aspect of your identity, gender, sexuality, whatever it is. So there's an element of that coming through as well. And so, with all that being said, how we are being called on to work with your inner child, to reparent your inner child, is first and foremost to give care and attention and recognition to the parts of you that did not receive it when you were growing up, which you may already be doing. And in some cases, this is a call and reminder to give attention and value to both, even if one was more starved than the other, that you are able to recognize that all aspects of you are acceptable and to be able to stand firm in that and not just lean into one side to an extreme to spite the other because that was the more accepted part of you, but to value each of them equally and to find ways to help both aspects of yourself integrate together and to help all of you come together to feel acceptable and seen and to recognize that you're not divided up into this part and that part. You are you, right? And other people might have at times divided you up, right? Because they didn't know how to understand all of you because they thought, that some aspect of your heritage or your personality or your sexuality or your gender was too foreign to them or too mystical or unimaginable to them to contend with. But you were never just one thing or the other. You were always just you, right? And so the elements of your upbringing, the elements of your heritage, the elements of your gender expression, your sexual identity are parts of you that contribute to the whole, but none of them are just you, right? And so you going in within and being able to see yourself as a whole being rather than these parts that have been maybe focused on by others, right? You now being able to see yourself as a whole, to experience yourself as the whole. And also doing some ancestral work, right? So when I was talking about digging into your ancestry, if repairing or communicating with actual direct ancestors is not in your wheelhouse or not something you want to do, although for those of you who are like more spiritually inclined, if you are someone who does communicate with spirits or does shamanic journeying, does meditation, doing certain meditations or journeys associated with your ancestry, maybe something you want to focus on right now. Communicating with certain spirits through mediumship, if that's something that you are interested in or do, could be something that's really healing for you. But it can also be done through just research and reading and maybe talking to people from your culture, from your family, or if not your family, your culture and your cultural background to learn about, and also even if there's because when I say your cultural background, if say you're like a white person from America, right? You might not fully know your whole cultural background, right? And so being a white person from America, I know actually some of my breakdown of where members of my family came from, but a lot of white people in America have very mixed cultural backgrounds, and there might be a lot of people here who are not that, who have very distinct and like a parent who's from one country and a parent who's from another, or a parent who's from one ethnic background and a parent who's from another, right? But some people don't have that, right? Looking into focusing on one aspect of your ancestry that you haven't before and looking more into the traditions and the traditional culture that may have originated from that place, the more indigenous cultures of your place, right? So there's there were shamanic traditions and there were druidic traditions and such in Celtic ancestry in Ireland and Britain and all those areas and locations. So that's something that someone with that heritage could, for example, look into. Whereas if you're from a different place with a different heritage, you don't have to necessarily know, I guess is what I'm trying to say, your exact lineage and trace that all the way back and know what all your traditions were to look into something that you feel or are aware could have been part of your ancestral practices. What you feel called to. And what I'm getting at is that I feel like there are a lot of you for whom aspects of yourself that are not accepted in modern culture by other members of your current culture, whether that be, white America, black America, any ethnic group in America, or just America in general, or another country, Ghana, Britain, China, Vietnam, etc. I'm not going to list all the countries in the world, wherever you're from. Whatever, dominant culture you were raised in, or whatever cultures you were exposed to that didn't maybe accept or give you that understanding of all of you digging more into that cultural context to discover and uncover the ways in which who you are is acceptable. Because there are people who will and accept and understand you from all different kinds of cultural backgrounds. And there are all different kinds of traditions and such. Like, for example, in the case of like people who are in the LGBTQ community, there are a lot of traditional cultures from all over the world that recognize people of various gender identities and sexualities naturally, right? And it was only things like colonization that may have caused that to become unacceptable in certain places, right? And then there's other cases where maybe it's been, there was a history of certain things not being accepted at the time. It's not like, just because it's not like if you go far enough back, everything was just sunshine and rainbows necessarily everywhere. But having more of an understanding of the perspective people were living from and coming from at that time, there's an element to which certain beliefs and things could be depersonalized for you. The more that you learn, or the more that you connect with even just elements of the culture that speak to you, while recognizing that you don't have to accept the ones that don't, right? Because that's really what I feel like we're dealing with in this group, is just this tension between a connection to a way that you were raised and a culture that you have connection to in childhood versus your values as an adult that may have shifted outside of what the people who predominantly represented that culture to you actually valued and taught you. And reconnecting with your roots in a way that allows you to marry that with your new values and or with the parts of you that were just never fully accepted and acknowledged to begin with as a child. And recognizing that you don't have to subdivide yourself and your psyche in order to maintain your connection with all these parts of yourself, that you can find a way to bring them together and accept yourself as a whole with all of these aspects in one. Like, you are allowed to be one person with all of these facets, one person with all of these backgrounds, one person with all of these connections and roots and identities and things, and then all of them can come together and, like, right? You don't have to, like, constantly break yourself down into pieces for other people. That's what we're talking about here. So to sum that up, self-recognition, like recognizing all the parts of yourself as equal and important and valuable, and then also like sort of finding a way to see yourself holistically as like a whole entity and person, and not just as whatever someone else finds acceptable in you or whatever you're allowed to be in certain settings, right? And digging into and opening up to your ancestry, your roots, whether that's connecting with specific ancestors or just connecting with a certain culture, connecting with a certain tradition, and learning more about it and learning to revisit it or re-see it or learn it from a new lens that allows you to keep the wholeness and fullness of yourself, but also keep that connection that you may have always had or you may be reforging with this background of yours. So I hope that all makes sense. I'm going to close this reading out, group 2, with a Moonology card. So if you have a question that you want to inquire, I did this in group 1 as well, about with the Moonology cards. I can't promise you'll get like a straightforward answer necessarily, but focus on that question now. I'm going to give an interpretation based on the reading and how the card fits in with the context of the reading, but also just like if you've got a question that you want to ask the card and see what answer comes out and see how it might relate to that specific question, do it, use your own intuition to interpret what that can mean and experiment with that, have fun with it. So I'll give you a moment to focus on your question. If you need to pause it, you can pause it, and then we'll get a card. So group 2. Almost got a card, but did not. So what's group 2's closing message from the Moonology cards? Okay. We have, don't let your past hold you back, South Node. Well, that's pretty straightforward, especially given the fact that you are the one you chose the ancestress, which you could just say the ancestor, whatever, the ancestress card, because obviously, we're focusing on your past. We're focusing on your ancestry. We're focusing on your childhood. And so, South Node, don't let your past hold you back. I mean, it means just that. And that brought another message through with this 5 of Cups. With this, okay. Okay, so this is basically what I was saying before, but like it's a new way of saying what I was saying before and another lens that might resonate with some of you. It just, sometimes I get like these messages that come through and it feels a little belated, but I'm like, all right, glad you're here. With the Five of Cups being here as well, there could be a tendency to dwell on the past, to focus on the past, to see your ancestry and your childhood as something that is past, and yet to be stuck on it and stuck in it in a way that is emotionally unhelpful, that can let you, can keep you stuck in old ways of seeing things and in seeing the downsides and in seeing the worst of it. And or only focusing on the parts of you that were accepted, or swinging to the other extreme and focusing on the parts of you that were never accepted to the expense of the parts of you that were, when all of you is actually needed to be felt, right? But there's this, with the Five of Cups here, I could also see this as like just focusing on the past, focusing on what already happened, focusing on what didn't work. And when we're connecting with our ancestry in the present, it's like, yeah, in a way, like that is focusing on the past, right? If you're learning about your ancestry, you're focusing on that, like technically that is the past. But what we're doing is bringing your roots into the present. Again, like this idea of modernizing and or bringing in the tradition, the culture, the background, and updating your relationship with it to fit who you were in the present, which in certain cases, when you learn about certain cultures, actually does mean going back a bit more to your roots, because sometimes those roots did exist in certain parts of a culture and then were erased and now are being refound. And so for some of you, it could be that process. And then for others of you, there's also the process of just like, hey, just because something is traditional and was a part of my upbringing doesn't mean that like it's entirely wholesome or entirely something I need to practice exactly the way it was. Like I am allowed to claim the sacred bits of this for myself in the present and update aspects and beliefs that are surrounding it to fit what is sacred to me now, to my understanding of myself, to my understanding of the world. If not all aspects of this background, culture, tradition, whatever it is that you grew up with, if not all aspects of that work for you anymore or are aligned with who you want to be, right? And so, yeah. So we're not dwelling on the past. We're not letting the past hold us back. Anything from the past that we want to bring with us, we're experiencing it in the present. We're being present with it now. Not how was it when I was growing up? How is this part of my life now? How is this part of my life going forward? How do I update this belief system with my updated belief system, right? How do I update this experience with my updated experience? And feeling free to do that, because honoring the past doesn't mean living in the past and letting it hold you back. It also can mean like understanding how it impacts the present and making decisions in the present based on how you want the future to go. Honoring what you learned and knowing that that always gives you the opportunity to update, to shift, to change. That's information. And that can be how you honor the past. Like honoring the past doesn't mean not changing things. Honoring the past can mean like acknowledging the learning, acknowledging the growing, the experience that you had, and taking that information in and allowing things to shift and change, allowing yourself to grow and shift and change because of the experiences you had in the past, because you let the past change you and shift you, right? So that's a way to look at it. That's a new perspective. Yeah. And a lot of this is around a perspective shift that you were having around your childhood, around your past, around your background, whatever that may be. Shifting your perspective into something new that also brings along elements of what was once old. So that's all the messages I have for you, group 2. So I hope that resonated. I hope you found that interesting and helpful. If you are interested in personal readings and you are watching between now and the end of May 2026, so before June 2026, all personal tarot readings are 30% off, so you can check out the options for that on our website, sunflowerphilosophy.com. Also, you can check out links to our other stuff. My mom and I are hypnotists, so we talk about that more on our podcast. We have a link to that, and you can learn more about our hypnosis services on sunflowerphilosophy.com as well. So with that being said, thanks again for watching. I hope you have a wonderful life, and I will see you in another reading again sometime very soon. Bye! Hi, Group 3. If you selected the pink butterfly, not that you can tell it's pink, and the rebeless, or the rebel, then you are in the right place. And this is your reading all about how you can reparent yourself. Guidance for how you can reparent yourself right now. So if there's elements of your inner child that are acting up and you want to figure out why and how you can help yourself, or just learn how to meet some needs that you might have not had met when you were younger, whether you had a good relationship with your parents or not, it's neither here nor there. We're all complex human beings. Sometimes things happen or don't happen. You know what I mean? And so we're just exploring that now as you are, hopefully an adult, or at least older and old enough to understand what I mean when I say these things. And so, you can look back now with a new perspective. And so that's what we're doing. And to begin with, before we get into the tarot, I'm going to use the Marielle Tarot to get messages and guidance for you. I'm going to actually talk about interpretations I'm getting from your card first and foremost. So when it comes to the rebel, the rebeless, the message I'm getting right off the bat for you for reparenting your inner child is letting yourself run free or rebel. Either you're someone who never really feels like you never really got to have your rebellious phase, or you're someone who almost needs to, or is being called to, reconnect with a time in your life where you were in your rebellious phase, to maybe heal certain things around that element of you. So for some of you, it could be your teenage self, or maybe some of you were just a very rebellious small child, right? In some cases, again, as I mentioned, you might not have actually gotten to rebel. Maybe you grew up in a very strict household. Maybe there were there were a lot of rules, and there were a lot of, maybe you're someone who was very much a rule follower, and there are certain ways in which you still feel hemmed in your present life, but need to feel free to have the spirit, the rebellious spirit that you never really got to let fly. I'm not sure. I'm thinking of the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen. Maybe the Hunger Games was significant to you growing up for some of you if you're in that age range. Doesn't have to be, but that's coming through, of course, with the rebel here, because she is a rebel, although not necessarily a willing one for a lot of the series. And then also Rebel Without a Cause is coming through very much with James Dean and his red jacket, and this whole thing of a rebel without a cause, in the sense that there's a sense of rebelling against something but not knowing quite what, not really understanding I don't have a specific maybe message I'm trying to convey or thing I'm trying to get done, but I just feel this need to disobey, this need to not be hemmed in, this need to be free, right? And that could be a response to a more subconscious feeling of something's not right here, something's not working for me, maybe a larger feeling that the way that society is constructed is just not working, right? So there's something in that here. So it's quite a range, right? Because some of you, like I said, could have the experience of actually having that rebellious phase when you were growing up. But because the Hunger Games and Rebel Without a Cause are coming through, I feel there's also a wide range of generations here. Some of you who are around for Rebel Without a Cause, or maybe connected with it no matter what age you are, and then also with the Hunger Games, connecting with it no matter what age you were when it came out, or maybe being of the age group that was primarily reading and watching that when you were growing up. So yeah, there's quite a range of experiences here, but what you all have in common is that you're all connecting with this rebel energy right now in the present moment, and that is important for connecting with your inner child, because I think regardless of whether you identified as being rebellious at any phase in your childhood, there is something that's almost inherently rebellious in a lot of children's spirits when they're growing up, even if, like, maybe if someone's raised in a certain way, or has a certain temperament, they might be less likely to rebel or disobey. But, like, I'm thinking about the children I babysit for, and, like, one of them is 4 and has definitely entered a phase where they are more keen to find ways around rules, or to say, but I want to do this, you know, instead of doing what is asked of them. And it's one of those things that, you know, when you are in charge of a small child, you might understand, well, why we go to bed at a certain time and why bedtime is important, right? Because it's like, well, if you don't go to, you know, get good sleep, then you're not going to feel so great in the morning. You're going to be cranky, and you know, it's also not healthy for you. You need sleep for your health. But as a 4-year-old, you don't understand that. You don't know why. You just know that you can't do what you want to do when you want to do it. And you're like, well, what do you mean? You know what I mean? And so it's one of those things where it could be frustrating for a parent to deal with that lack of understanding and lack of perspective, and to want what's best for a child and to tell them what to do, but also not know how to explain that to a child who isn't at capacity to necessarily understand it. But also, there are cases where I feel like children understand more than we think, and maybe we don't explain as much when we maybe should. And there's also cases where perhaps a child needs more experience with learning about consequences and learning why for themselves that something is important. And sometimes that experience is taken away by very strict rules, where it's like, okay, well, you're telling me I can't do all these things, but I'm never actually getting to experience the why of it. And yes, there are some things for which you don't want to necessarily experience the why of it. And then there's other cases where maybe, you know, someone needs a little bit more freedom to learn on their own, to make their own quote unquote mistakes. And because also parents, adults, anyone, no one necessarily always knows what's right for everyone in every given moment. You know, we're going with information that was given to us that may or may not have been actually as constructive as we needed it. And some of the things that we might teach people are dangerous, or that they shouldn't do, or unacceptable, might not be actually necessarily something that is all that dangerous or unacceptable, unless you're in a certain community with a certain perspective. So all the nuance that goes into raising a child sometimes can be really hard to juggle when, you know, you don't want to necessarily just like force a child to follow certain rules, but you also understand why these rules are in place and you are trying to do what's best for them. And so children can be very rebellious when they're growing up because they might not have the full context for the rules that they're given. And then also there is a certain stage at which developmentally it is actually healthy and normal and natural for a child to want to push back against their parental figure, because up until a certain age, I forget what age exactly, a child almost sees themselves as like part of their parent, right? There's not as much differentiation and individualization, and then that kind of becomes a natural part of growing up that a child goes through, where they're like, no, I'm my own person now. You know what I mean? Let me find out what that means. And for some of you, maybe you never really fully strongly got to stand in your own personhood yet. Maybe there's a part of you that didn't get to differentiate itself, or when you did, was met with such pushback that there's a harboring of feelings of being misunderstood, of feeling unaccepted, of feeling like you never really got to free yourself from some of the things that you were maybe trying to free yourself from. So yeah, you know, I feel like in this case, like this could be a case where there was a lot of misunderstanding when you were growing up. I mean, I think that could come through in any of the groups, but I'm feeling for this group that there could have been a lot of misunderstanding around your intentions. Maybe you even didn't fully understand sometimes the intentions that you were coming from, like rebel without a cause. Like maybe you didn't know what your cause was, but you just had this feeling of like, well, I need to differentiate myself somehow. I need to stand out from the group, or I need to be different from my family, you know, stake my claim on my own existence. And there's something unresolved about that energy, whether it came from like the sort of angsty and tumultuous time at which you were going through that phase, or it came from not really quite having the opportunity to explore that phase. So, I hope all that made sense. That was a lot to come through, but let's get into the tarot cards now and get more information. So, how can group 3 reparent themselves through this? Okay, that fell on the floor. Oh, there's not too much nudity going on here, but I don't know how this is going to be read by the, by YouTube. So I guess I'll just put a little thing here. So we have the Queen of Wands. Well, that makes so much sense. The Queen of Wands with the Rebel and like all this fire, and the Queen of Wands being fiery and like so much orange. Okay, yeah. What else? Okay. We have Judgment. Yeah, okay. And we have the Page of Wands. Okay, well, yeah. And 6 of Wands on the bottom of the deck. So much Wands energy, so much fiery energy. It's giving Katniss, it's giving the girl on fire. It's giving, okay. Let's get into it. So how can you reparent yourself? How can you heal what needs to be healed in this case? Well, with the Queen of Wands coming out, immediately the first thing I thought of was like focusing on confidence and taking up space. So the archetype of the Rebeless, is she going to worry about like inconveniencing people or taking up space? No. The whole point of the Rebel or the Rebeless, she is someone who wants to be seen, wants to be heard, wants to make waves, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to like go from 0 to 100 and go from like someone who, you know, maybe you're not like this, but maybe some of you watching are like quiet and you don't rock the boat and you don't make noise or whatever, especially in certain situations. Maybe you avoid confrontation. It doesn't mean you have to go from like doing that to like yelling at everybody and making a fuss all the time. But it means that there are small ways in which you can at least reframe how you experience yourself in the world. Notice if you're shrinking yourself down, because you don't have to immediately take the spotlight or shout about things or take up a new cause. But you can also just hold yourself with more confidence and more assuredness. You can acknowledge and accept and embody the fact that your existence is welcome and important, and that you are allowed to exist and take up space. And so it can be done in subtle ways, but it's coming through big and loud, because I feel like for a lot of you, even the smallest, maybe not for all of you, because some of you, like, you might already be a little bit more out there or outgoing, and you're meant to get louder and you're meant to be more in your face. But for others of you, you're like, even the smallest act of just like existing and taking up space can feel like you're shouting, you're being too loud, you're being too much. And we are being asked to work on the self-worth, work on the confidence, work on the presence. Because this Queen of Wands and the Rebeless and the Page of Wands and this Judgment card. Look at this Judgment card. Can you see? This like is like a phoenix, kind of like it's like in a being reborn in a fiery explosion, right? It's like I feel like you could like whisper to someone across the room and it feels like you're shouting, right? But like we're learning to have more capacity for existing and for taking up space in this group. That's what we're doing. And to be heard, whether you are speaking on causes that are important to you, or you're speaking on just like, you're speaking up for yourself, standing up for someone else, right? Putting yourself out there, even if it's just in a small way, right? It doesn't have to be this big you don't have to become like an activist and you put yourself on the front lines unless that's something that you feel called to do, you know? But this is like claiming your right to be seen, to be heard, to be present in whatever way that because like some of you, it's not like even like you're necessarily going to change your behavior overnight. It's more just how you feel in yourself, how secure you feel in just being in a space. So yes. So first of all, confidence, self-worth. The Queen of Wands knows she's got it. The Queen of Wands is here. She is present. You notice her, you take her in. She's sexy, she knows it. And she can be, and it's not from like the validation of others that she knows she's sexy and confident and worth it and whatever. It's from her own knowing of that. And other people might respond to that energy, right? And validate that subconsciously. But like, she, deep in her subconscious, knows her worth and knows her and validates her worth and feels validated inherently in existing, right? And so that's what we're working on with you, right? And it doesn't have to all be done in one day, but we're like, this Queen of Wands is like your goal, right? This confidence, this assuredness, like those are the words that keep coming through. Now, with the Judgment card coming out, there's a rebirth, right? So for some of you, there might be for some of you, there could be like a rather dramatic restructuring of your internal life, or maybe your external life, where you're relearning who you are and growing into a new person. So like for some of you, like reparenting yourself in this case, it's like, it's not just about, and it's not that, like, I think in every case, you're doing this because there's a part of you that's ready to transform in the present, and that might be being held back by the past, right? But I feel like there's a very strong vibe in this group that, like, some identity that you once might have held onto or been attached to from childhood or from a certain aspect of your life when you were younger is, like, reasserting itself so it can be reevaluated and transformed. So, like, you are very much going through what feels like a personal transformation where you are changing as a person. And yes, it might change your behavior and how you express yourself in the long run, externally. But I think the most profound change is taking place in how you experience yourself, right? And that comes first. You know, how others experience you might shift as well, but it might be in subtler ways, or it could be in bigger ways. It depends, right? This transformation, like I said, it might feel big and loud to you. And for some of you, it could be big and loud to other people too. But for others of you, it's just going to feel big and loud within yourself. And it's going to be a lot more subtle to others. Because it really depends. But like with this Phoenix on the Judgment card, like there is a rebirth. There is a call to change. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. My throat is really like feeling it today. I'm not sure why. But because that really came out in your group, this call to use your voice. I mean, this Phoenix on this card looks like it's screeching, right? And so, again, maybe for some of you that just means standing up for yourself in like a small way. That to you, like, you know, if you're a people pleaser or someone who is really insecure about like speaking up for yourself or like making noise in certain situations, like just making a phone call could feel like you're like screaming, right, at someone. But like, it's just going to feel like that the first few times you do it. You're going to get used to it. You're going to get used to the idea that like it's okay to like make that phone call or to just say, hey, I'm not super comfortable with that, or to ask a question or what have you, whatever way that you in the past have held yourself back from making yourself known in certain situations. It's like, it might feel like you're yelling at first, but you're not, and you'll get used to it and you'll get more confident in just like speaking up in a capacity that is normal and acceptable, and also like comes from this place of self-assuredness, right? Because it's like when you're embracing this energy, I mean, maybe at first it will come from a place that still feels uncertain and new and maybe not always the most secure. But what we're really building here is this foundation of security, inner security and stability of based in your own self-worth and your own value, just as an individual taking up space in the world, that like anytime that you're standing up for yourself or someone else, or standing up for a cause, or using your voice, or just speaking up and being like, hey, like that's not okay with me, or hey, you know what, maybe we need to rethink this. It'll be coming from a place of security and stability and trust in your own self. And it's not just like you're making noise for the sake of it. It's like, it's because there's some things that you really believe in or that are really important to you that you want to speak on or speak up for. And when you feel that confidence within yourself, I feel like some of you may have this perception of standing up for yourself, or like questioning things, making yourself known, like standing up to an authority figure in your life. You may have this perception of people who do that as someone who's just being loud for the sake of it, who's just like being a pain in the ass, who's like being too much or whatever, because maybe you grew up around a lot of people who maybe were like that. Maybe there are some people who modeled this example to you that where people were maybe trying to cause problems, or weren't coming from the most genuine place. Or maybe you were taught that that was the case, when maybe some people were just speaking up and questioning things because it was important to them, and they genuinely believed that, like, hey, things need to change, right? So maybe you were taught to view that behavior as too much, and it wasn't actually that people around you had like any maybe more negative reasons for like making a fuss, quote unquote, in certain situations, right? I feel like it could come from multiple different experiences or different perspectives why you feel the need to maybe hold back or keep yourself smaller. But at the end of the day, when you actually have a firm foundation of like your own worth and your own values, when you're speaking on them, you're not afraid to, if there's a situation where you're like, nah, this is clearly not in alignment with what I value and what I want, and you choose to speak up, you're not just being loud for the sake of it. And other people are not necessarily going to take it well, but you don't need them to, because you're not speaking up so people will like you. You're speaking up so something will change. And so there's also this lack of attachment to what other people think of you in this energy. So you're learning your self-worth and building that foundation so that you don't feel as attached to people's perception of you. So that if you need to, and again, like some of you, this is really about what I would consider, but what might feel like to you differently, what I would consider to maybe be smaller stuff, where you're afraid to like be like the most minor inconvenience in someone's life, almost like, and to you, even just saying like, I felt uncomfortable with that, or I didn't quite understand that. What did you mean by that? Feels like being rude, and it's not, you know? And like learning how to just do that, and also to just be in a public space and like not feel apologetic for your presence. Like for some of you, it's just as small as that. It's that shift, but like that shift, like people will pick up on that energy, and also you will just feel better just being who you are and being present in yourself. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about working on this self-worth, speaking up for yourself, using your voice. It can be in very small and subtle ways that make profound changes in how you experience yourself in your life. And then for those of you who are looking to, or might eventually want to use your voice in a bigger way than before, or who are stepping out into some sort of spotlight and daring to be different in big ways that might cause bigger waves. Like what you are learning is to not give a shit what someone else thinks, as long as you know you're acting in your integrity, in alignment with your values, right? Other people might misunderstand that. Other people might have different values. You're not speaking to them. You're not catering to them. And those who align with those values and might need to hear what you have to say, they need your presence. They need you to know your worth. They need you to stand up, right? Because they'll use that example to strengthen them. And you also might introduce people to new ways of thinking about things and seeing things, where some people might need that to challenge them, to bring them around. And other people, you know, they might take your example and they'll walk the opposite direction, but maybe they needed that too in some way for some reason. So yeah, this is about you taking up space. And honestly, like I feel like a lot of this has been less focused on like the child aspect of you and more focused on how you are in your present self. So I feel like in this group, and like this could be the case in all of them, but in this group maybe more than others, it's less about looking back at how you were hurt or how you didn't quite act in the way that you wanted to, or how you weren't quite accepted. And it's much more about knowing that in the present moment, regardless of what happened in your past, this is what's important for you now, right? Especially with the Judgment card here, it's feeling almost like you're becoming a new person, like you're being born anew. And so in that case, like, looking back and focusing on your past may not be where you need to be. It's knowing that perhaps there are wounds that exist that cause you to act in this way. And if you feel called to dig into why that is and to dig into the specifics of what brought you to that place to heal, do so. But if you feel like maybe that's not where you want to start, or that's not necessary for you, or you've already done that, then just focus on what you know you want to shift and change in your experience. And that is around growing your self-worth. Because this Page of Wands here, actually, I believe that she's Joan of Arc in this deck. Again, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but because I believe this is Joan of Arc. Even if it's not, like, the fact that she's coming through is important, but, like, hello, like, the rebel, the Queen of Wands, the Page of Wands, Joan of Arc, like, hello, like, someone who was not afraid to do what others would have judged her for doing, wouldn't have understood why she was doing it. Like, you don't have to agree with Joan of Arc's whole perspective or beliefs or why she was doing the things she did to recognize the archetype of, like, someone who's standing up and taking a stand and making their life known, and doing so as someone who in the time period they were in may not have been taken seriously, who may have been underestimated, may have been disrespected because of assumptions of who they are, and yet stood up and did it anyway. You know what I'm saying? And then just, like, from this being the Page of Wands, like, childlike, impulsive, energetic, creative, right? Adventurous, someone who is not afraid to go on their own path and live their own path, and, like, is in a more childlike and fun and lighthearted energy, because they're someone who, I don't view the Page of Wands as someone who is overly concerned with what authority figures are telling them, what anyone else in society is telling them to do. They're not even really paying attention to that or thinking about that, not even subconsciously. They are very much in their own world, on their own adventure. It doesn't mean that you don't have consideration for other people. It doesn't mean that you don't care about other people or causes. No. It's more that you are, like, you're not focused on other people to the detriment of your own spirit, of your own energy, of your own, like, life. Yeah. This is someone who is brimming with vitality, who has things to say and says them, who takes up space, who has this energy of being fully self-possessed and confident. And the degree to which you rebel in society, to which you go against the grain in whatever context you're in, will vary depending on what your situation is and who you are, right? And so, like I said, for some of you, you're not about to take up arms and, like, I don't know, be a Joan of Arc, all right? For some of you, you might be more of someone who wants to stand up, be an activist, challenge people in your community or in the world, to speak your mind more, to say, hey, actually, that's not cool with me, and to feel like it's okay if you don't get a good response from people because, like, you're not as attached to their perception of you. And then there are others of you who are literally, right now, you're just learning how to take up space, how to be you, and how to feel confident being you in the way that you want to be, and to not see, like, even the smallest inconvenience on others, like, as a problem, right? To, like, be like, hey, like, I don't have to live by the rules that either were forced upon me as a child to be acceptable to society, or the rules that I enforce upon myself now as an adult to be acceptable, right? Like, I don't have to do things the way that everyone else does them. I don't have to do things the way that people told me to do them. I am forging my own path, and that path can be quieter, but still my own, and still, like, valid in just being unique. Or, you know, the path might be a little louder, might be a little more, might stir the pot a little more and wherever you are at, and that's also okay. And not everyone has to understand. And that's really the crux of this. Wow, all this fire, all this red. Yeah. There's a lot like here, just confidence, energy, creativity, like spirit, fighting spirit, even if it's in a low-key way compared to, what all these cards are depicting. That being said, group 3. I'm going to close out with a Moonology card. So I've been doing in all the other groups, I've been saying, like, if you have a question that you would like answered by the Moonology card, just using your own intuition, like when the card comes out, like, how is this related to your question? Ask it now, consider it now. If you need to pause to spend more time thinking about what your question is, feel free to do it. I'm still going to give an interpretation of the card that's associated with the message that I'm getting here, but I wanted to give you the option to also, like, have a question answered if you have one. So feel free to, like, play along at home. So with that being said, let me get your card. So group 3. What is group 3's Moonology card to close out this reading, please? What is group 3's Moonology card to close out this reading? We got one popped right out. Your hard work is paying off. New moon in Capricorn. Well, okay. You could take that as a sign, in relation of course, the answer to your question. Also, just in general, if there's like an area of your life you weren't even thinking about, but you have been working hard in, and you haven't been seeing quite the results that you've wanted, your hard work is paying off. But also for some of you, you actually have maybe been working on your confidence and working on your, like, ability to just feel secure in yourself, to take up space, maybe to speak up in certain situations. And maybe you didn't necessarily connect it to your childhood, or that wasn't the focus for you, or maybe you did. But I feel like some of you have already been working on this, and you need to know that the work you've already been doing is making a difference. And maybe you are actually making more progress than you think, and maybe you're actually showing up a lot more differently than you even think already. But also, maybe some of you are still stuck in, like, the messy middle, and you're not quite feeling as confident as you want, but you are shifting the energy. You're shifting your behavior, and that is building confidence, even if it's slower going than you want it to be. Yeah, so honestly, it's just saying that, like, sooner or later you will see and feel and understand the results of the work that you've already been doing on yourself or in a specific area of your life. And also for those of you who do have a larger cause, right, who really resonate with the rebel energy and have something that you want to support, if there's ways that you have been supporting, even if it's been quieter than maybe you've wanted it to be, even if you feel like you're not making enough of a difference or not doing enough, this is letting you know that, like, your focused attention and energy in this area, even if it's not exactly how you want it to be or it's not as loud as you want it to be, is actually paying off. It's doing something, right? This is a new moon, so it's like the beginning of a new cycle, but it's also a new moon. Like, you can't see the moon, but the moon is still there. And that's, I think, something that could resonate with all of you. It's like, you might not be fully visible in the way that you want to be yet. You might not be, your efforts, your desires, your personality, whatever it is that you haven't fully put out there, might not be visible yet. The work that you put into yourself or to something in particular might not be visible yet. But just because it's not visible right now does not mean it's not there. And the new moon always becomes the full moon eventually. So you're on your way to fully revealing yourself, right? And just because you're not seen doesn't mean you don't have an impact. Like, the new moon in Capricorn, like, whenever there's a new moon, the energy of the new moon still has an impact, even though you can't see the physical moon itself, right? And so the energy that you're working with, that you're working on, that you're exuding is still having an impact, even if you feel like you're too quiet or you're uncomfortable with the idea that you give off.
Hi, Group 3. Sorry for the cutoff. This has been happening a lot lately, but I ran out of storage. What I was going to say is that your energy does have an impact, and what you give off in personality, in your presence, already is known and felt, even if you doubt that impact. And so while you are being called to step up and have more of an impact and feel even more confident in your self expression and express yourself in ways you may have been afraid to in the past, just know that it's building on something that's already present in your energy and that you already are noticed and seen. You can't really go unnoticed and unseen. So you might as well get comfortable with the reality of that and with experiencing that on a higher level or to a higher degree, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's on stage in front of a lot of people or that's simply just more in your family, your community, your friend groups. So that is all I have for you, group 3. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this reading. I hope it was helpful. If you are interested or so inclined, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. I would love to hear how this resonated. If you're interested in personal readings, they are 30% off until the end of May 2026. So through May 31st, 2026, you can get 30% off on a personal reading when you book it through the site. So go visit the website, sunflowerphilosophy.com, for more information. And if you're interested in hypnosis services, my mom and I do that together. Also, if you want to check out our hypnosis focused podcast, you can check that out. That's linked as well. And I hope you have a wonderful life, and I will see you in another reading again sometime very soon. Bye.